Welcome to the Bon Robin channel. Prepare to be shocked awake. And we're off to another insightful ramble.
Call fucking Phil Griffin. I don't care who the fuck you have to call. Stop the hammering. Stupid goddamn entrails that you allowed him to stick out there. Jesus Christ. Crazy fucking sound coming in my ears, fucking stupid hammering.
America needs its own denazification program, and that denazification program has to start with people like General Kelly and all these other white oligarchs and women as well who have dishonored themselves by working with this racist thug, this Nazi coddling pig.
The ritual defamation vortex.
Who calls himself President of the United States should resign en masse and have nothing more to do with him and leave him totally alone.
But this right here, bullshit, okay?
We have adopted his lies instead of any truth baseline. The Republican Party is in hock to a third-rate goofball, grifter, con man who would have only been successful in the United States from the mid-20th century on, when our literacy rate declined, television took over, and the whole culture became pornified on every fucking level. Sorry about the language. Thank you. My name is Frank Schaefer.
But this right here, bullshit, okay?
When leftists aren't in control, violence is their response.
Who benefits from the present Russia hysteria being whipped up by Theresa May in the British Parliament, in the UN Security Council, and in the EU Parliament? Is it the globalists or the Russians? I mean, who benefits? That's the answer. You have to ask yourself, who benefits? The globalist Luciferians hate, they hate Russia for its move back to its Christian roots and for guarding their children from the LGBT XYZ propaganda machine of the New World Order, the new religion, the new morality. Russia wants good relations with the West, but not at the expense of the Russian character, not at the expense of the Christian society, the Russian Christian society, the Orthodox society. This fellow that Putin was supposed to have tried to kill had already been tried and convicted for treason in Russia and served 4 years in prison and was pardoned in exchange for spies from the West, from America, Russian spies in the U.S. They did an exchange that allowed him to move to the West and have a life. Boy, that sounds really, really harsh and evil, doesn't it? The fellow's name Skripal was arrested in 2004 and in 2006 was convicted of treason and sentenced to 18 years of imprisonment. In 2010 he was released as part of a prisoner exchange deal with Russian spies in the U.S. jails. He went to live in the United Kingdom, where he has lived in supposed retirement ever since. Another interesting fact, although again possibly coincidental, is that Salisbury, where Stripple lived, is only 12 kilometers, that's about 8 miles, from Porton Down, the UK Principal Research Center for Nerve Agents. Can you picture? 8 miles away. So which makes more sense to you? That Russia would smuggle nerve agent across multiple borders and thousands of miles to assassinate a man who had more than a decade ago been caught and tried by the Russians for his betrayal of his nation. We're talking about a Russian Benedict Arnold here, tried, convicted, and served time in prison. All his knowledge of Russian secrets is dated. He was arrested in 2004, so he's been out of the game for 14 years. So is it likely that Putin would order his assassination when there was nothing to be gained by Putin or Russia by his death? Would he order that assassination knowing that the West collectively is suffering some sort of mass hysteria of anti-Russian propaganda, that the US and the UK CIA GCHQ media is pumping out anti-Russian propaganda 7 days a week on a 24-hour cycle? I mean, is Putin so stupid that he would not understand that such an action would simply create another fake tool in demonizing Russia, another tool to demonize Russia, given to these globalist Luciferians? I don't think people realize what a huge part of the Luciferian globalist plan is: the complete deconstruction, demolition of the nuclear family, with male father, biologically female mother, and children. One man, one woman, and children. They're doing all in their power to paint sodomy and all of its accompanying fetishism, lesbianism, transgenderism, and whatever other they can make up, because it keeps changing month to month, literally. All this LGBTQXYZ BS debauchery, they are claiming for it a moral good. The more debauched you are, the more evolved you are, the more moral you are. That is the story, folks. All of this homosexuality as a moral good propaganda comes directly from this Antonio Gramsci Marxist anti-Christian agent in the U.S., Kai Feldblum, and the radical Marxist movement behind her. She is a major soldier of Lucifer. Kai Feldblum thinks religious freedom should be enslaved to gay rights. One has to ask oneself, why did Donald Trump renominate her for a top civil rights post? She is a member of the Council on Equal Opportunity. Her radical views, as I have previously stated, mean that churches would not have the right to ban gay and lesbian priests and pastors, or teachers, or anything else, or transgender clowns, advocates of pedophilia and pederasty and bestiality and all the other letters that these radicals plan to add to that LGBTQXYZ agenda. And these churches, according to her, should submit to this immoral spectacle as a matter of law, regardless of the particular church's moral view on the subject. So why is Russia hated by these Luciferians? Let's don't just dismiss this. You think, oh, really, that's really not it. It's all about other things. It's all about strategies and military power and economic competition. No, folks, I'm telling you, it's this simple. Why is Russia hated by the Luciferians? Because Russia has returned to its Christian roots. And they've made propagandizing the LGBTQ XYZ BS agenda to children a felony. Oh yeah. There are economic issues, none that can't be negotiated and settled with cooperation. There simply are not, hear me now, there simply are not strategic issues, because the globalists in the power of the Anglo-American Empire have Russia completely surrounded with military bases. Do you realize that the Anglo-American Empire, which is at war with itself at the moment, has over 900 military bases around the world? And Russia, last time I counted, had 900 bases all around the world, and in Russia 11. We, that is NATO, has troops literally on Russia's border. Can you imagine the reaction if Russian ships surrounded the British Isles and they had complete armored divisions on our Canadian or Mexican border? We do have complete armored divisions literally on Russia's border. There's no strategic threat from Russia. Russia's surrounded. Russia really doesn't have a military option except the one that Putin named. If you mess with us, you try to invade us, we'll take you out with our nukes. What else can he say? So why the paranoia about Russian aggression? I'm telling you, it's not about Russian aggression. It is about this Luciferian movement, this destruction of humanity, this Malthusian plan, this soft and hard genocide that is the LGBTXYZQBS agenda. Our 900 globalist Anglo-American empire bases around the world, you have to remember, they're about spreading democracy. So the story goes, at least, we have destroyed civilized nations, wreaked havoc across the globe, used Islamic terrorists as surrogates to destroy Christian cultures in the Middle East. Lebanon used to be Christian. Did you know that? I remember when it was Christian. And countries in the Far East, and Christian countries in Africa. Where is the Russian aggression in that? When the CIA overthrew the democratically and legally elected government of Ukraine and replaced it with literal, and again, I'm not speaking figuratively here, just like literally we have those divisions on Russia's border. Well, not speaking figuratively here, we set literal Nazis in power in Kiev. And that Nazi government in Kiev immediately acted against the ethnic Russian population of Ukraine, which is concentrated mostly in the east of Ukraine. They acted against them by outlawing the use of the Russian language anywhere in Ukraine. Now, it was not like a law, say, if English were declared, or the official language of the U.S., yet no one would be arrested for speaking Spanish, and no one would be arrested for Chinese signs in Chinatown, and Russian signs in Little Russia, and Spanish signs in Little Havana. But in Ukraine, a sign in Russian was suddenly a felony. To make it more ridiculous, the Ukrainian language is actually a dialect of Russian, cross-pollinated with a fair amount of Polish, the influence of the Roman Catholic incursions into the Slavic lands. So what was Russia's big crime? They chose to protect the ethnic Russians of East Ukraine from the Nazis in Kiev. And of course, then there's Crimea. You heard, they invaded Crimea. No, they always had a base in Crimea. They always had a base in Crimea. And the Crimean people, taking a look at this revolution that the CIA, this coup that the CIA caused, putting these Nazis in power in Kiev, and I'm not using Nazi as a pejorative, they're literal Nazis. Putting this Nazi power in control in Kiev, they voted 9-1 to leave Ukraine. And in a separate vote, they voted 9-1 to rejoin Russia. And of course, this is all demonic, hellish, blood-soaked, not a democratic process. The people expressing their will. Now think about it. Russia is in Syria legally, according to long-standing and recognized international law. The U.S. is in Syria unlawfully, illegally, illegitimately, illicitly, improperly, nefariously, wrongfully, criminally, lawlessly, and we were the money, the training, the equipment, the infrastructure, the intelligence support, creating, arming, and controlling ISIS. The dark state, the deep state, the CIA. ISIS is a CIA jihadi legion. So there's Russia in Syria, legally, asked in by the government, already had bases there, asked to come in and help fight against these jihadis. And we're there creating the jihadi army and supporting them. What we saw in the British Parliament this morning was a Hermann Göring propaganda operation. I swear to God, it looked like some scene from some apocalypse-themed movie. The obvious intellectual dumbing down of these people in Parliament was so complete that the members of Parliament seemed literally demented, spewing the same practiced talking points and mumbling speech patterns and fake bravado. I mean, we've been attacked. All they needed to make the scene complete were some harsh blue neon lights, whiffs of fog and smoke floating by, some occasional crackling and arcing of electrical wires. You know the scene, you've seen it 1,000 times. Let's face it, it appears the old country has grown genetically thin. Here's what I mean about being a Hermann Göring propaganda operation. Göring said, quote, "Naturally, the common people don't want war, but after all, it is the leaders of the country who determine the policy, and it is always a simple matter to drag the people along, whether it is a democracy or a fascist dictatorship or a parliament or a communist dictatorship. Voice or no voice, the people can always be brought to the bidding of the leaders. That is easy. All you have to do is tell them that they're being attacked and denounce the pacifists for lack of patriotism and exposing the country to danger. It works the same in every country," end quote. And I'll add, it works every single time. You know, can we become so informed? Can we become so awake that the same old psyop move won't work? Theresa May and others of this genetically thin, these genetically thin morons, talked about Russian human rights abuses. Do you know what the sole human rights abuse is that had this demonic horde up in arms against Russia? It's not a human rights abuse at all. It is Russia's refusal to allow their own children to be trafficked, to be mind-controlled, to be indoctrinated into sodomite LGBTQ XYZ abuse. Russian abuse of human rights in a nutshell, making gay propaganda to minors a felony. That's their horrible, horrible human rights abuse. That's the nutshell of it. That's the crux of it. Compare that to the British child trafficking that they cannot stop, the British pedophile sex grooming gangs that they cannot stop, and the growing Sharia rape culture that they cannot stop. Putin stopped Western adoptions, realizing that pretty blonde and blue-eyed Russian children were being adopted to traffic, to sexually enslave, to abuse, and even to kill in Luciferian New World Order ceremonies. So which country is really the human rights abuser? Russia, that protects their children, or Britain and the U.S., where to protect children from gay propaganda is considered here an act of hate? Up is down, black is white, gay is good, and you probably come from a shithole.
Up is down, black is white.
Gay is good.
And you probably come from a shithole.
It is collective insanity at work here. And I've not even mentioned the slaughter of babies in the womb. And truthfully, Russia's record on that subject, because of the years of communism, is no better than ours. We don't have that excuse. And of course, in this insane apocalyptic scene of the British government, they trotted out the old mimetic theme. Russia has become a rogue state. Oh man. Protect your own people from Nazis who would not allow them to speak their own language, and you are rogue. Accept the invitation of the legitimate and legally elected government of Syria to come and help them defeat the CIA ISIS monster in Syria, to save them from further, the Syrian people from further Christian genocide. And you are rogue. Protect your children from the Luciferian cabal of sex traffickers and sodomites and child abusers and satanic propaganda, and yep, you guessed it, you are rogue. You know, sadly, Donald Trump is only half rogue, as his appointment of Kai Feldblum proves. And yet, the same Luciferian globalists want him dead. They hate him as much as they hate Putin. In the horror scene of that parliament this morning, they talked about Russian propaganda and claimed that British state television, the BBC, the propaganda arm of the British government, was free press, and that RT, which is at least one rank removed from the Russian government, was propaganda. The BBC, government owned, government operated, free. That's free. The BBC, that's free. That's free press. Even though it's paid for by the government, even though they control everything on it, and if you say anything on the BBC that is true, you can go to prison. Go on a BBC program and tell the truth about Islam and see how long you last. This is complete Marxism, complete totalitarian control. I mean, they talked about liberty when GCHQ spies on everyone all the time, everywhere, just like the NSA, just like all their counterparts in the Five Eyes nations, Canada, the United States, New Zealand, Australia, and Britain. They talked about lawlessness in Russia and the rule of law in Britain. And folks, you can't believe in the rule of law while at the same time spying on everyone all the time. They talked about breaking up child trafficking rings and the children being placed with the local community. Now, this is in Britain, the big child trafficking ring. I know you've read about it, that they recently broke up in Britain. And the children being placed returned to the local community only to discover that the same children were re-trafficked. That says it all, folks. You cannot create a humane society populated by post-Christian pagans and Islamic barbarians. It's a fact. If you don't have a Christian basis for the culture, then this is what you're going to have. And I don't see that they have a prayer in hell of improving. But we can at least contain that stink pot and not let it spread to World War III. They are so concerned about these two Russians, this ex-spy father and daughter, and they did nothing about tens of thousands of trafficked children in Britain that they knew about for 40 plus years. Britain has completely ignored this massive child trafficking problem, and over during the course of those decades it has implicated members of Parliament and members of the royal family, and they have covered it up, shut down the investigations. They've killed people who push too hard. Common knowledge for 40 years. But it's Russia that's the rogue state. All Theresa May lacked this morning was Colin Powell's PowerPoint presentation. I suggested that they show a picture of Boris and Natasha with some aerosol cans or something just to make it entertaining. You saw this prophecy. I saw this completed, absolutely completed this morning, watching that British Parliament. While I was watching it, these words were ringing in my ear. Aldous Huxley saying, by means of ever more effective methods of mind manipulation, the democracies will change their nature. The quaint old forms, elections, parliaments, Supreme Courts, and all the rest will remain. The underlying substance will be a new kind of totalitarianism. All the traditional names, all the hallowed slogans will remain exactly as they were in the good old days. Democracy and freedom will be the theme of every broadcast and editorial. Meanwhile, the ruling oligarchy and its highly trained elite of soldiers, policemen, thought manufacturers, and mind manipulators will quietly run the show as they see fit. And that elite that he's talking about, they are Luciferian. And they absolutely detest Vladimir Putin because he's taken a stance against this sodomite culture. And young people, some of you have told me, well, I don't see anything wrong with being gay. That means you're totally Marxized. That means you've lost track and touch with your own humanity. Because I'm going to say it to you really, really strongly. If you can't understand that one man, excuse me, don't let the kids listen to this. Let me see if I can clean it up a little bit. If you don't understand that one man cramming his member into the intestines of another man is unnatural, if you don't understand that that is unnatural, that that is inhuman, that that is contrary to nature, that that is abominable, then you've lost touch with your humanity. You've been Marxized, you've been brainwashed, you don't know who you are. So don't come back and fuss at me, because I know the difference between a rectum and a vagina. Don't come back and fuss at me, because I know that boys have penises and little girls have vaginas. Don't come back and fuss at me, because I know like that student at Indiana University over in Pennsylvania who was kicked out of class for saying that there were only two genders. Well, he was wrong. He was wrong. They're not two genders. They're three genders: masculine, feminine, and neuter. But in humans, there are only two sexes, and they're male and female. And you are male and you are female, or there is the possibility in extremely, extremely, extremely rare cases where physically the sex may be ambiguous. But it's not a choice. It is a biological reality. Little boys have penises. Little girls have vaginas. And if you can't figure that out, you are hopelessly lost, and you deserve the slavery that these Luciferians have in store for you. Short life, but you're going to have fun. Now, looking past that future world sham of democracy that the British Parliament was this morning, I want to share with you what Craig Murray, who's former ambassador, British ambassador to Uzbekistan, had to say. He said, "Remember, the same people who assured you that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction now assure you Russian Novichok nerve agent are being welded by Vladimir Putin to attack people on British soil." Do you realize how ridiculous that is? He's mocking it, and he's right to mock it, because it's ridiculous. As with Iraq, WMD dossier, it is essential to comb the evidence very finely. A vital missing word from Theresa May's statement yesterday was only. She did not state that the nerve agent used was manufactured only by Russia. She rather stated this group of nerve agents had been developed by Russia. Well, antibiotics were developed by a Scotsman, but that is not evidence that all antibiotics are today administered by Scots. The Novichok group of nerve agents, a very loose term simply for a collection of new nerve agents the Soviet Union were developing 50 years ago, will almost certainly have been analyzed and produced by Porton Downs. That is entirely what Porton Downs is there for. It used to be to make chemical and biological weapons as weapons, but today it still does make them in small quantities in order to research deficiencies and antidotes. After the fall of the Soviet Union, Russian chemists made a lot of information available on these nerve agents. They shared information, wow. In one country which has always manufactured very similar persistent nerve agents as Israel. This Foreign Policy magazine, a very established U.S. publication, article on Israel's chemical weapons and biological weapons capability is very interesting indeed. I will return to Israel later in this article. So we know that Israel is making this gas. Incidentally, the Novichok is not a specific substance but a class of new nerve agents. Sources agree they were designed to be persistent and of an order of magnitude stronger than sarin and VX. That is rather hard to square with the fact that thankfully nobody has died, and those possibly in contact just have to wash their clothes. Oh boy. You see, he's hinting at an FF. You know what an FF is? An FF. A bogus banner operation. In fact, he gets around in this article. Russia to Judgment is the name of the article. Craig Murray is his name. You can Google it. He gets around to stating that he thinks it's most likely. I mean, here he is, a ex-British ambassador, and he's stating that he thinks it is most likely a British bogus banner. He puts it this way. He suggests, let's put it that way, that he suggests that the motive for the attempted murder of Skripal and his daughter was to further promote the anti-Russian hysteria that inflicts the Western media and the body politic. And come on, by common sense, you know that's what it is. Thank you for listening.